Hello, and welcome to the Behaviour Management webinar. My name is Tom Bellwood, and I work for Challney High School for Boys, as well as the Chiltern Learning Trust. I've been teaching 10 years and held a variety of different roles, including Head of Year, Head of PE, and Assistant Head Teacher for Behaviour and Safeguarding. What I hope you gain from this webinar is an understanding of how to manage yourself and your classroom, which will ensure you can engage students appropriately and ensure they behave. I'd also like to acknowledge that there are different people listening to this presentation who come with a variety of experience and work in a variety of different settings. Some colleagues listening may have worked for a number of years, whilst others may be just starting out in the teaching profession. I hope by following the advice given in this webinar, it will allow all of you to be successful in improving your classroom and behaviour management techniques. The aims of this webinar are to understand and develop important structures and routines, setting high expectations and standards, power of positive assertiveness, and consistency. Starting with structures and routines, the way students behave in your classroom strongly correlates with their outcomes. It has been documented that students that have behaviour categorised as good or outstanding, 1, perform higher academically, 2, schools record higher staff retention and higher staff morale. 3, the school's recruitment policy and outcomes are much higher. And finally, both staff and students state that they have more time for actual learning. However, students' behaviour in classrooms still remains a significant challenge for many teachers. The key task for a teacher is to create a purposeful learning environment which is bought into and understood by all students. Before we look at education, let me ask, why do we drive on the left-hand side of the road? Why do we whisper when we enter into a library? These behaviours are classified as social norms. If you Google social norms, it states social norms are regarded as a collective representation of acceptable group conduct, as well as individual perceptions of a particular group conduct. So in layman's terms, it means rules that are prescribed by what people should and should not do, given their social surroundings. So how does that correlate to the classroom environment? Well, as a practitioner, you need to create social norms that are and are not acceptable in your classroom. You may have observed or spoke to a colleague who teaches the same class as you, and then they're wonderfully behaved for that colleague, but when you come to teach them, they seem to turn into this completely different class. Part of the reason for this is their structures and routines are well established and embedded. The students understand expectations of all aspects of the lesson and understand how to work within these parameters. Looking at this list, do you have a structure and routine for all these different activities? Do you make it explicit to the students how you meet and greet them, their specific seating plan, how the register is conducted, how you start your starters, how students are expected to ask questions in your lesson, how you deliver sanctions or rewards, and how you send the students off to their next lesson? Here's an example of, as a PE teacher, how I would set up a routine and write it down for students entering the changing rooms. So I make it clear with a 5-step approach. I get the students lined up in alphabetical order. As the students enter this changing room, I shake all their hands to welcome them in. I give the students 3 minutes to change, and as a teacher, I count down from 3 minutes. And I expect the students to be sat down once they are changed. So what needs to be considered for you when you're developing your classroom routines? Well, first of all, you might need to think about the school building, because it may not actually be feasible for you to, say, line up your students outside your classroom due to having small corridors. Or some of your schools may have particular policies regarding on how you deliver rewards and sanctions, or how they expect you to do a starter at the beginning of your lessons. This is all fine, as you can add these expectations into your routines. This quote, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit." What this quote means is, in order to embed these routines and make them become social norms, you have to ensure you repeat them daily, particularly with groups that have really challenging behaviour. After listening to this section, here's my recommendations to you to help develop your routines and structures in the classroom. First, learn your school policy. If you know your school policy inside out, you'll be able to embed this policy into your routines. Second, write out your structures and routines. Make a clear list of all the different activities that will take place in your lesson, from starters to preliminaries to how the students enter your classroom and how they leave. Follow this religiously. Make sure this is a habit. It's something you repeat daily so the students can be trained and they can learn your routines and structures. And finally, hold students accountable to these expectations. Make sure that if these aren't followed, you deliver a consequence to these students for not following your routines. Working in any context or school can be challenging. Classrooms can be very challenging if the routines or structures are not embedded and over-communicated to students. Without these in place, students will have a lack of clarity and vision of what is expected of them and low expectations placed on them. Staff will feel overburdened by workload and constantly feeling they're dealing with behaviour. It will create inconsistencies between staff and departments. So as you can see, structures and routines are vital. But working in tandem with your structures and routines will be the high expectations and standards set by staff in terms of adhering to these routines. High expectations and routines are the most frequently mentioned points in NQT and teacher training discussions around classroom management. One of the most important aspects of setting high expectations is that the teacher must embody the ambition, aspiration, and high expectations for every member of the school community. They must demonstrate through their actions and words the belief that student progress is not only possible, but expected. The expectation standards set by the teacher must be consistent with one another and must be consistently demonstrated. Rules and values that fluctuate too much confuse the students and create a grey area in which students will come to exploit. The teacher's visions for what constitutes acceptable and desirable behaviour should be made clear and communicated to all students. Students must be made aware constantly of the expectations required of them. Expectations must not only be high, but demonstrated repeatedly and consistently. Central to the concept of embedding routines is the idea that there must be rules. Rules can be explicit and implicit, but for the sake of good conduct, it's advisable that they are explicit, as short as possible, compact and memorable. They must be widely known and demonstrated throughout all of the school life. When they are broken, it isn't a trivial matter. There must be some sort of form or consequence, which is not to say that expectations should never be permitted, but only in exceptional circumstances. Rules are a form of routine, and the difference is they're explicit, codified, and formal. The rules you set in your classroom must be shared and understood by all students. Rules are a reliable way of ensuring that the conduct is communally understood. They should be designed for the benefit of the many and the few. They help students learn, keep them safe, and feel secure, and they assist staff in every lesson, every single day. Not everything is forbidden or must be governed by a rule, and the rules cannot cover everything. But a core set of rules creates a skeleton for good conduct, either in communal spaces or what's acceptable in classrooms. Many teachers have rules, but don't adhere to them. Some teachers have bad rules. Some prefer to believe that teachers don't need rules. But all of these approaches should be avoided. Teachers should have as few rules as possible or as they need. Older students with a clear understanding of how to behave may require less structure or guidance. But there is no perfect set of rules. So, how do you go and set high expectations? First of all, know your subject matter inside out. High classroom management must always start with outstanding teaching and learning. If you are a diligent practitioner and work hard in planning your lessons, you'll be well on your way to ensuring your students are focused and on task. Have high expectations of students' academic performance. Do not accept students coasting or not performing to the best of their ability. By holding students accountable to their academic performance, you will also ensure that they are focused in your lessons and attempting to maximize their potential. Create and share your expectations with the students. Make them simple and clear and be relentless in their delivery. This will show that you are fair and a consistent teacher who prides himself on their classroom management and the students' academic performance. The power of positive assertiveness. Imagine you have finished your training year and and we're back in September. This is it. You're with your class. Nobody sitting at the back, just you and your class, and not having to justify every move to anybody. Utterly brilliant, but utterly terrifying at the same time. There is, however, a fundamental problem with taking on a new class. Is one, you don't know them, but perhaps more importantly, they don't know you. This situation is not unique, not only to recently qualified teachers, but teachers who maybe have moved recently to a new school. The connection you make with children that builds a positive relationship takes time. In a school with a great culture and climate for behaviour, it could take 3 months to turn the corner. However, a school that's in chaos, it might take you a year to build the respect that some assume teachers are automatically given. Fortunately, you will be surrounded by some true experts who you can learn from. Take this scenario. Mrs. Smith walks into a class of marauding children and gently raises one eyebrow and instantly returns them to diligent, disciplined scholars. The teachers observing give a small gasp. To them, this is behaviour management gold. Desperate to learn from this master, who can simply raise an eyebrow, they ask, how high does it go? How long should I leave it raised? What about the lowering of it? Yet behind the simple facial cue is actually years of grinding out relentless routines, holding fast and tight to boundaries and cajoling with the most unruly children. Behind that raised eyebrow is a certainty of tough love blended with the daily kindness. In the subtlety of a well-established cue, there is a lot of hard work, and unfortunately there is no magic eyebrow. You start by creating emotional currency with your pupils, and I recommend starting as soon as you can. Meet and greet at the door, make eye contact, have high expectations. Maybe, not in this time that we're in, but when it's all over, offer a handshake. Make your feedback on work personal, thoughtful and kind. Eat in the dining hall, walk around the playground when you're not on duty, and sign up for the trips. Build emotional currency by making children feel valued, important, and that they belong. Use a single positive note each week to recognise children who have gone above and beyond for 5 days in a row. Resist the name to put the naughty names on the board, and instead use recognition boards to highlight children who are behaving above and beyond the minimum standards. Be interested in them, be generous with your time, and show them how much you love your work. There will be times when your authority is challenged, where children behave badly towards others, and depending on where you work at times you might be shocked at the disruption. There will be children who don't want to simply hand over their trust to you. Children who you need to make more time to help with them, and they might even make you question your very existence. Everyone will tell you that it isn't personal, but it may feel personal. How you respond is utterly pivotal, and this starts with your behaviour as a member of staff. The challenge is to be able to respond to even the worst behaviour without showing anger, frustration, or revealing the full range of your vocal power. Your ability to control your own emotions sits at the heart of excellent practice. Try make a pledge not to shout or resist the pointing finger. Resist screwing up your face and rolling your eyes. Remove yourself and your emotions from the line of fire. The response to poor behaviour must be a rational one and not an emotional one. Emotional responses end up with an empty threat and escalating power plays. Rational responses, however, do not rely on the emotional state of the adult to protect everyone. Strip out all the negativity from your children in the everyday interactions you have with them. Use a script if necessary, a mantra, a catchphrase. Make sure your response to the angriest situations is the safest and most predictable. Start every behaviour intervention with, I've noticed. Practice it and make it your default. I've noticed that you're late, for example. There is no judgment in I've noticed, and children are unlikely to defend themselves. If you start with an accusation, and it's a short hop to an argument and a small step to a confrontation, your planned response to poor behaviour makes all the difference. As your relationships grow and your skill develops, you may need to have less and less of these conversations. Remember, it's not the weight of the punishment that will produce the best behaviour, but it's the certainty that there are consequences for crossing boundaries. Certainty. Students with the better relationships are more pro-social and less aggressive and less oppositional. The more certainty you create, the faster you will be able to get your students to respond. So, How do you improve your positive assertiveness? First, use deserved praise, making sure exemplary effort and behaviour is rewarded and recognised, not just a student who raises their hand, for example. Secondly, make it visible. Use a recognition board, positive postcards, or maybe a phone call home system. And finally, ensure if a student breaks a rule, there is a certainty there'll be a follow-up and they'll receive a consequence for their actions. Consistency, consistency, consistency. All schools should have a clear and communicated policy on consequences, what they are and how they are incurred and avoided. Most importantly, they must be used consistently across the whole community. The absence of this consistency is one of the key factors in failures of either school policy or classroom management. Policies are only as real as their demonstration in practice. A policy that is frequently ignored is one that will never succeed. The reliability of a school system and your classroom management system is a key factor in its success. This doesn't mean that no exceptions can be made, particularly if there's a good reason, such as a student who has a set need. But the exceptions must be exceptional and with good reason and coherent with other exceptions. Sanctions don't need to be severe, but as stated earlier, their certainty is more important than their severity. Rewards need not be material. In many circumstances, proportionate, sincere recognition of student achievement is the most valued reward available. Intrinsic rewards to good behaviour should be prioritised in order to avoid reward fatigue, where students become desensitised to these benefits. External indicators of intrinsic success can be more powerful motivators and reinforce the social norms, such as prize ceremonies, for example. However, students need to see others behaving well in order to emulate them. This is consistent with the view that social norms are powerful inhibitors and catalysts for behaviours. What is seen commonly is absorbed as custom. In this regard, it is important for staff and students to see exemplary behaviour, both positive and negative, in their peer groups. This is where, as a member of staff, you must set a good example. This not only builds a positive social norms for behaviour, but also increases trust between students and staff. Consistently having high expectations are the only high expectations that have a long-term impact. School rules that are conveyed but never enforced or required are no rules at all, and students learn quickly the difference between what boundaries are supposed to exist and which ones actually exist. All students need to meet the expectations set of them. Anyone not meeting this expected standard must expect an intervention of some sort, a reaction from the staff body. Any member of staff not maintaining these boundaries and expectations must also be challenged or retrained and engaged with the standards expected. School rules and values must be lived, explicit, constantly in every aspect of school life. For you, they must be clear in your classrooms. They must be in the corridors, in the playgrounds, on trips with visitors, in games, to and from school, in assemblies, at the award evenings. Everyone is responsible behaviour, and this message must be repeated and repeated to all members of the school community. So how do I become more consistent? Well, first of all, it's knowing your rules inside out, making them clear and visible in your classroom, following through religiously, regardless of which pupil has failed to meet your expectations. And understanding it takes time. Students will understand your expectations as you'll have to reinforce them on a daily basis. It's that constant drip feeding and reiteration that will help make you more consistent.